Hi, I'm BJ, and this is the Arcane Alienist Podcast. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Arcane Alienist. It is October, and this episode will be my contribution to OSR October, October SR. This idea comes from Rob, who's the host of the Down in the Heat podcast, and the idea was to, much like August is RPG a Day, talking about positive things and great things about role-playing games in general, was to focus on some of the cool and great aspects of the OSR scene in role-playing games. Sometimes, modern games and OSR, I think they both have their share of sort of provocateurs, bad actors, people who stir the pot. But for the most part, I think they're both filled with lots of wonderful, great people and cool games and things like that. So one of the things I appreciate about old school games is the simplicity. I find I'm maybe a little more drawn in my preference anymore to what you might call rules light systems, not necessarily just old systems. I like newer systems as well, but I always appreciate when they're very flexible and not overly crunchy and just well designed and fit well together. I think there's a story I've heard, I don't know if it's true or not, of Steve Jobs back when they were developing. I believe they were first developing either the iPad or not the iPad, either the iPod or maybe the iPhone. And he looked at sort of a function he wanted the operating system to perform and said, this has too many steps. It has too many processes. I want it down to, and I don't know the number, but it was something like, currently it had like 40, and he said, I want it under 10. And a while later, a software engineer comes just excited and very proud of himself. I processed it. There was 40. He had gotten it down to something like 20, and Jobs just kind of looked up from his desk and said, I said I wanted it in under 10, and then just went back to what he was doing. But the principle there, whether that story is true or not, is there's a certain something to be said for elegance, for not making things overly complicated, for wanting something to perform some function or carry out some objective in as few steps and in as most streamlined and efficient way as possible. And I think that's an aesthetic we find in old school games. Their presentation, particularly when you're talking about the original role-playing games, which a lot of, particularly the retro clones, they're based on, or that we take our paces from in OSR games, style games, which are new games designed to sort of mimic the way things were done. Back in the day, the presentation of the original D&D, 3 little black books in the white box, or even of first edition AD&D, and a lot of those older games they're sometimes hard to digest because of the way they're laid out and the way they're written. But the games themselves are very, sometimes well designed and work very well. And I think if you can look at white box role playing, which is the original 3 books of D&D, OSR, just cleaned up and organized in a more digestible manner, originally as part of Swords and Wizardry, but now it's kind of its own game. But look at all the other games that have been built on that chassis since White Box sort of established itself as a sort of type of OSR game. And in addition to the classical, D&D style fantasy you get from White Box, there's Joe Salvador has Eldritch Tales, which is a Cthulhu style, H.P. Lovecraftian horror style game based on that rule set. There's a White Star. It's a space opera. You can do Star Wars style games with it, or other types of Flash Gordon, Buck Rogers types of fantasy. There are lots of different white box style role playing. That's it'll say white box somewhere sometimes on the cover of the book to let you know that's the rule set, and it goes back. It is that core rule set that Gygax and Arneson developed way back in the 70s. BX the same way. You find old school. Now we say old school essentials compatible because old school essentials is a big thing. But you see people using the old school essentials, which is BX D&D, that framework to branch out into other styles, other genres, other types of games with sometimes just a little bit of adaptation or tweaking. So, some of those games continue to work very well, and because they're simple and streamlined, they're also easy to sort of tack a thing on if you feel like something is missing, to come up with another simple mechanic or another simple rule to get at what you want. So that's one of the things I mostly appreciate about old school games is that they're very lightweight and easy to use once you're familiar with them, and with your imagination and a little bit of just experimentation here or there, you can get a lot of mileage out of them. For different types of, they don't do everything, but they can do a lot, right? But the title of this episode is the 3 R's of old school. You think about the old saying, the 3 R's of education: reading, writing, and arithmetic. But part of what the OSR sometimes struggles is to define what it is. Is it attempts to remake? Initially, it was a lot of ways attempts to sort of clone original older versions of Dungeons and Dragons, so that they could be distributed and played today. And that's since evolved into other approaches to just sort of capture the style and feel of gaming from the 70s and 80s, even if it's a completely new type of mechanic or game design. People debate over what, the OSR can't even give a consistent definition of what it is. I want to focus on the R. I think everybody agrees that OS means old school, right? What does the R stand for in OSR? I think most often it's Renaissance. But that I've also heard revival. So I wanted to talk for a minute about what those might be. There are 3 R's of old school in OSR. Let's talk about revival. Revival is a back to basics concept. I think is a back to basics. We're going to go back to the way things used to be done, and do that now. That's what a revival movement is. It tends to go back to concepts, principles, ideas of an earlier time, and bring them forward, and not perfectly, not exactly, right? You might change it. Nothing is ever copied completely the way it was in ages past, but it is an attempt to sort of get back there. And I think if you look at the retro clones that I were talking about earlier, you particularly see that. You see that in Swords and Wizardry, Labyrinth Lord. I know I'm going to forget some. Old School Essentials, Osric, White Box Role Playing. That getting back to the original sorts of rule sets of the 70s and 80s, particularly of Dungeons and Dragons, but I think there are other games as well. People have done those sorts of throwback games, or just not even just cloning them, but just digging up old copies from buying them off eBay, bringing them out of storage, taking them off the shelf and dusting off, and just playing the original games, the original BX, original AD&D, original Traveler, original Boot Hill or Gamma World, or those types of games. So there are a revival, a yearning to go back and just do things the way we used to do them. That's one R in the old school, in the OSR, the old school revival. Renaissance. When I think of Renaissance, I think there's a little more. Renaissance does mean rebirth. There's sort of a reawakening, but also a flourishing. When we think of the Renaissance, there wasn't just one Renaissance, but the Renaissance period that kind of ended the Middle Ages and then moved us towards the modern era. There was going back to some values, some ideas. There was a sort of a going back to Greek philosophy and Roman ideas from Rome and the ancient world, but also a lot of flourishing of new ideas, new forms of art, new forms of expression, new forms of thinking about things. So it wasn't just a revival a rebirth and recreation with newness to it as well, right? Renaissance, where everything is flourishing. So the old school Renaissance, in that sense, if you make the art Renaissance, is we're taking older themes over moods, older principles, and finding new ways to explore them. Again, some of the retro clones get into that because they do tweak the rules to add a little bit of modern aesthetics. That's where you might also get into some of the new SR games, new school, whatever R stands for, that are designed to help you play old school games with some modern sensibilities. So a Renaissance, and I think overall, I think the reason we sometimes use a Renaissance is just you see how big the OSR has gotten. And everything that's out there. I mean, things there's always something to back on Kickstarter. There's always something new to find on DriveThruRPG or itch.io or someplace like that falls under that umbrella of OSR. So, broadly speaking, there has been a renaissance of old school approaches to gaming, which includes the revival of the actual old games, plus sort of new ways of trying to take that and build something new based on the aesthetics or the things that we may have lost in sort of modern gaming with its more complexities and crunchiness, right? The last R, the third R that you might put in OSR, I don't know if I've ever heard anybody say this, and that's old school revolution. Well, it's a revolution. That's a complete tearing down of what's there to replace it with something else, right? It's just a complete turnaround. I don't know if we've had an old school revolution or not. I think people are growing pretty, there's a big do-it-yourself element to the OSR. And some people have an axe to grind, particularly with Wizards of the Coast, as it exists, mostly as it exists as a subsidiary of Hasbro. I think my own sort of concerns with Wizards of the Coast are not the game designers and the artists that work in-house at Wizards of the Coast who are just trying to, make a product people will like, but it's that corporate aspect of being a subsidiary of Hasbro. For goodness sake, earlier this year they synced the Pinkertons on some guy because somebody accidentally gave him some magic cards before they were supposed to be released. It's just that heavy-handed, ironically what they need to be doing at Hasbro is create a cyberpunk role-playing game because that's the kind of world they apparently want us to live in. And I say that knowing that I still continue to, I'm very interested in some of the role-playing games they're putting out. Maybe not so much. I'm still kind of interested in Dungeons and Dragons, 5th edition. But their Transformers and G.I. Joe, that's still Hasbro. G.I. Joe and Transformers role-playing games that I'm kind of interested in exploring. I haven't had a chance yet. But there's this, again, there's enough of a do-it-yourself aesthetic in the OSR where people share, and we're buying products through Kickstarter, where it's more of a community effort to bring these games to the forefront, and then through zines and things like that are, even when people are making a living, it's a bunch of people chipping in a little bit of money instead of sinking, hundreds of dollars or more into a given game. It's sort of a rejection of sort of what the big guys, the big players in the market are offering us, and going for independent games. And so you could even include sort of the indie games in here, which are not necessarily part of the OSR, but they share a lot of the OSR, where they're smaller print runs, designers and authors who engage a little more with the community on the scene, who you can interact with on social media, who again, they're offering us things through Kickstarter and through smaller publishers, as opposed to going to big publishing house or big game companies. So I think that's could be a revolution in the sense that at least this segment of the tabletop gaming community is, hey, well, we're just going to do it this way. We're not going to just buy from a big toy company. We're not just going to buy from a big publisher. We're going to do sort of this revolution of, hey, we're going to do it ourselves, or we're going to stick with sort of the equivalent of the sort of the smaller mom and pop creators who we can have more of a relationship with, and keep things sort of contained and localized. I know that sounds strange to call that localized when we're talking about stuff that's going on over the internet across the world. But I think you can see what I mean. It's sort of you get a sense of more personal connection because of the way these things get funded and published and feedback between the creator and the people who play the games. That's not to say there aren't some larger publishing houses that I enjoy. I don't think they're OSR, though. I particularly still appreciate Goodman Games and Cobalt Press, although, there's a lot of old school aesthetic in Dungeon Crawl Classics, even though it's got a lot of modern game design in terms of its mechanics. But Goodman Games and Cobalt Press, I still think are still really cool and put out good stuff. Modifius, who's putting out modern games, it still seems like they I've enjoyed kind of their products and nothing there. But yeah, having sort of the big player in the scene be right now in corporate hands with Hasbro and some of the stuff they've tried to pull with the open gaming license and Magic and stuff like that. So it's getting harder and harder to want to be a part of that when I know I can have just as much fun with these simpler games. And yet at the same time, sometimes they put out really creative, innovative, interesting things that I want to engage with. I don't know if I've veered off of focusing on the positive and now on the negative, but I guess, it's not that I'm talking about negative things about the OSR. I'm talking about some of the shortcomings of mainstream gaming, I guess. But now I am starting to ramble, I can tell. So it's probably about time to wrap this up. So there you have it. Revival, Renaissance, Revolution. 3 R's of the OSR. Before we end the show, I got a couple of calls from one from Karl Rodriguez and one from Jason Connerly. I think this is in response to towards the end of the last episode, I was talking about what should my sign-off be. And so let's hear what these guys have to say, and then we'll end the show after that.
Hey, BJ, I just wanted to say another thing that you do really well is encourage. I think you encourage me a lot. Thanks for participating in my little 3 Dice in the Truth experiment and playing and being a great player. And I really enjoy when you play in one of my games. I think you bring a lot to the table. And I'm pretty tired right now. Amy and I had this, we had a booth at Comic-Con recently. Much different than attending a small gaming convention. This was huge. I mean, I've never been to Gen Con, or some of the other ones like Dragon Con or something huge like that. But this was much bigger than the small gaming cons I go to, and a lot of work, and it was very well worth it. Anyway, I just want to say thanks for being cool. All right, that's it.
Well, thank you very much, Karl. I definitely enjoy playing in the games you run. I do try to be encouraging and stay positive most of the time. I got to just a point in my life where, you can't just ignore bad things in the world, pretending they'll go away, but why dwell on them needlessly? We all need a little bit of positivity, right? And support, encouragement, and, that's how you hang out and have a good time with your friends, right? Thanks for the call. Heard a little music in the background. Glad you guys had a good time at the con, and I'll talk to you later. All right. So again, that was Karl Rodriguez of the GMologits Presents podcast, and he's also got a YouTube channel which he started. Which thus far I think I've been on every entry because it's mostly us playing Marvel Multiverse role playing. So check out his podcast and give us a look on YouTube as well. I'll put some links in the show description. All right, now we got Jason. Let's see what he has to say.
Hey, BJ, Jason here. Listen to your latest episode, and I think that's a great sign off. I think the more positive we can be in our podcasts and the less negativity we can bring out, probably the better off we're going to be. So I love it, and I look forward to what you do next. Take care.
Yeah. I just said that, and then Jason just echoed what I was saying about positivity. So thank you for the call, Jason. Yeah, I think it's a good time to be. We've come through a lot in the last few years, I think, as a society with the pandemic and with all kinds of other stuff. And there's still a lot of bad in the world going on. Again, we can't ignore that stuff, but our hobbies are here as not a way to ignore the problems in life, but maybe to get away from them. Sometimes they help us process them a little bit, as well. But gaming is very, or any hobby or any creative pursuit is very therapeutic and very good for people. So it should be a place where we come away feeling refreshed, renewed, restored. There's another 3 R's for you right there. Anyway, thanks for the call, Jason. That was Jason Connerly of the Nerds RPG Variety Cast. And so when he mentioned the sign off, so I'll sign off now and just say, wherever you are out there, take care of yourself. And whatever you do today, try to make somebody else happy. I'll be back later. Thanks for listening to the Arcane Alienist podcast. The music you're hearing is Come and Get It by Scott Holmes Music. The cover art is by Dave Bone. Be sure to check out his stuff at ironseer.com. You can leave me a message. I have my SpeakPipe account linked to the show description. You can also send me an email at arcane.alienist@gmail.com. Just embed a voice memo, or I'll just read the text to your email during a future episode. Once again, thanks so much for listening.